they can definitely be brutal together. Who is more brutal between them, do you think? Deadpool or Wolverine? Probably one of the most brutal Deadpool and Wolverine team-ups that I've ever read happened more recently in the comics in the current Wolverine series, which started back in 2020. In issue number 22, Deadpool and Wolverine are basically in the midst of a mission, kinda together. They end up acquiring what appears to be Danger's baby, basically, and during their escape with the goods, Wolverine pretty brutally uses Deadpool. It's some of the worst behavior I've seen from Wolverine to Deadpool before. I mean, I know they're not always kind to each other, but wow. And Wolverine is not known, like I said, for being nice to Wade normally, so it's pretty bad, guys. This is pretty brutal. Who do you think is the kindest to Deadpool, and who do you think treats him the most brutally? Is it Wolverine or is it someone else? Cable's gotta be up there too, to be honest. The first time Wolverine and Deadpool even crossed paths, it was pretty brutal and gruesome, to be honest with you. The first time running into each other, at least in regards to comic book history, although I don't think canonically this is the first time, would be in Wolverine issue number 88 from the 1988 series, considered Volume 2. It all goes down when Deadpool decides to pay Garrison Kane a visit at the very same time that Wolverine does. Or just before, rather. Wolverine is there to basically check in on Garrison on behalf of his friend James Hudson, aka Guardian, who you might know from Alpha Flight, but Deadpool arrived just a little bit before to find Kane so that he might get to his ex, Vanessa Carlyle, who he heard was running around with Cyborg. Deadpool basically trashes the place looking for any clues to where they might be and can't find Garrison or Vanessa, and he also can't figure out like where they would be. When Wolverine arrives, Wade's like basically all worked up and he's just ready to fight the old knucklehead. He's like, "Who's this? Let's go." Making quick work of him too when Logan leaps over Deadpool, kicking him in the face just as Deadpool comes up underneath Wolverine and basically shish kebabs him. Ouch. Looks like Wolverine might be getting some revenge for this move though in the new Deadpool and Wolverine film, so yeah, it's coming up with the claws, you know? This team up starts as most do as a versus. In the 1999 annual issue of Wolverine, Wolverine has actually come to get some payback for their last fight. While Wolverine came out on top in that encounter, Deadpool's ally in the fight, Dr. Bong, ended up giving Kitty Pryde a run for her money, ringing her around basically, put her in a dome and just discombobulated her. Discombobulate. So Wolverine was mainly here to get in a few punches on Kitty's behalf this time. However, the fight quickly shifts from versus to a team up when the duo's fight ends up basically smashing into some werewolf matters. They end up then forced to work together to fight against the werewolves, and by the end of the fight, with one final crunchy punch to Wade's head, Wolverine decides that yeah, they can call it even now. This next one is actually just a moment in time. The final end to the AXE Judgment Day tie-in story that we saw unfold in X-Force. Overall, I honestly have thoughts about this story in regards to how it tied in and connected with the main event here, but that's not what we're here to talk about. That's a whole other topic I could get into. We're here to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. Basically, in this final issue in this story, X-Force issue number 33 from the 2019 run of the X-Force series, Deadpool and Wolverine end up teaming in a sort of pseudo-savage land. It isn't really the Savage Land though, it's actually the X-Force's Shadow Room, which is basically like a holodeck. Basically think the Danger Room, that's what we're doing here pretty much. At the end of the story, the Shadow Room is collapsing in on itself and Deadpool makes a break for Wolverine to help in his fight against Kraven, who has basically turned the room into his own dreamlike hunting grounds, basically. Kraven has dubbed Wolverine the ultimate prey in this story, but don't worry because Wade is here to save the day. Sort of. As Deadpool states here, he hasn't really been super useful in this story except as comic relief, and that remains a fact when he rushes in to save Wolverine. Instead, as he currently has a body mostly made out of plants gifted to him by Black Tom after being reduced to just a head, he steps too close to some lava and watches as his plant-based bod goes up in flames, reducing him to a big head, baby body Deadpool. Wolverine then grabs up little Wade and makes a mad dash out of there, escaping just in time and leaving Kraven to be munched by a T-Rex. Don't worry though, because this all went down in the Shadow Room, of course. So Kraven is left pretty much just badly beat up and of course survives, as we see on, well, pretty much the next page. So yeah. In one of the most millennium feeling stories of all time, also very 90s feeling, probably because of the art, Wolverine ends up facing off against Wade. This happens because Deadpool has been tasked with acquiring Wolverine as payment for some medical bills, basically. Not his medical bill, obviously, hello, healing factor, but the medical bills of Siren, Teresa Cassidy. Deadpool is trying to get help for her and in exchange has basically promised to bring Wolverine to those who are offering to help her. He does so successfully, wearing Wolverine down down before filling him full of tranquilizers. This next one we're talking about is less brutal in the sense of an epic fight between our two heroes, and more brutal in the sense of what was going on with Wade here when Wolverine intervened. Deadpool, you see, had been kidnapped and was being held by an organization that sought to use him as a test subject to find a cure for the legacy virus, because they wanted to market it and make a bunch of money. But the fact that he was kidnapped to be a test subject against his will should tell you, what their process is like here. They weren't gentle, and in fact, Slayback, one of Deadpool's enemies, yes, Slayback is a real character, had actually been hired by the group and spent much of his time on the project tormenting Wade, carving out a tic-tac-toe game on his chest multiple times, and then they're basically playing like tic-tac-toe. Fortunately, Maverick and Wolverine teamed up to get Wade out of there and were able to escape the facility just before its self-destruct countdown was complete. Gotta jump out of that explosion, you know? At one point, Deadpool goes to Dr. Bong for some psychiatric advice, and as expected, the advice he gets is pretty wild, because Dr. Bong himself is honestly kind of a little crazy, and I don't think he's a legal doctor. He suggests that Deadpool resolves some of his past trauma by duking it out with Wolverine, and the fight that ensues is so brutal it allows Deadpool to actually have a psychiatric breakthrough. Yeah, it actually works. And yes, that is the fight that basically leads them to have a rematch later on when they crash into the werewolves. It's all connected in the great circle of brutal beatdowns. In X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool ends up making his first cinematic appearance. Kind of. He never gets the name of Deadpool explicitly, and instead is basically referred to as being like a weapon. This version of Wade is also very different from the comic book version we are familiar with. While initially appearing as a wisecracking mercenary before he's mutated, afterward his mouth is basically taken away, and he's made to look pretty much, well, nothing like his comic book version. Right down to his signature katanas. I mean, he does have those. In the comics, Deadpool typically wields them, these dual katana blades, which the team working on X-Men Origins Wolverine thought could be a lot cooler if they were implanted in Deadpool's arms and were extendable and retractable, like Wolverine's adamantium-coated bone claws. Oh boy. I love that they were like, it has to be like that because it'll be way cooler. I'm like, will it be? Will it be way cooler though? Will it be? I don't know. During his adventures with Cable, Wolverine crashed the party while the two were separated. Because of the crowd Wade was, let's say, kind of running with at the time, as his friend Weasel had basically taken up with Hydra, Wolverine ends up fighting Deadpool and removing his head from his body. This all goes down in issue number 43 of Cable and Deadpool, and by the next issue, the title is just temporarily hijacked, with Cable's name being crossed out and Wolverine's being written over it, as Wolverine and Deadpool continue their fight in the following issue, in issue number 44. A humorous kind of brutal interaction, if you will, mainly happens between Deadpool and an alternate version of himself here. But Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is also implied to be there at the time, and it does technically take place in Wolverine's movie, of course, X-Men Origins Wolverine. This is when Deadpool uses Cable's time-traveling device to basically fix the mistaken portrayal of him in his past, traveling over to this film so that he could put his former depiction out of his misery by just straight up eliminating him. Put us all out of that misery, so thank you, Deadpool. That's about it. I'm your host, Amanda McKnight. Until next time, you stay nerdy.